Jake Leguee from Saskatchewan. Jake, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So Jake, I know that you're managing a very large farm, 14,500 acres up in Saskatchewan. And I think just to give our audience a flavor for the work that you do, we have a video that you took with your mobile phone of the harvest. So, maybe we want to just give the audience an introduction to that video and then we'll launch into the video.
Yeah, so I shot the video while I was operating a combine harvesting durum wheat, and just sort of narrated what I was seeing and what I was up to. So hope you enjoy it.
All right, well, let's go to the video.
Hi everyone, my name is Jake Leguee, and I'm a farmer from Western Canada in the province of Saskatchewan. We're combining. So today we're harvesting durum. Durum is a type of wheat that's used to make pasta, specialty breads, noodles, and various other products. If you've ever had spaghetti, you've probably had Canadian durum. One of the cool things about combines and the technology we have these days is we actually get to see what that yield is in real time as we go across the field. So just looking at the monitor here where we get to view everything that goes on in this combine, you can see that number that keeps changing there, that 80, 90, down into the 70s. That's the yield in bushels per acre of the crop that we're taking off. So those are fantastic yields. Our field isn't going to average there, of course. It always looks better on the yield monitor than it does when you finally add it all up at the end, but those are great numbers to see. It means that we're doing something right in the crop that we're producing. And I'm just going to show you a couple other things on here that's really cool. So we've had auto steer for a long time in these combines. You can see that I'm not touching the steering wheel at all, but I'm also not touching the ground speed drive here, because the combine's actually managing that for me with these settings right here. The control unit actually measures how much material is coming into the combine and then adjusts my speed accordingly. So it's great for novice operators, and it's even great for people like me who have run a combine a lot. Reduces operator fatigue and lets us run longer during the day. So it's cool stuff. So hey, thanks so much for taking the time to share a little bit about what a day in my life looks like at this time of the year, and go out and eat some Canadian durum. Thank you.
Great. Well, thanks for taking that video and giving our audience a little taste, pardon the pun, of durum wheat and how automated farming now has become. But that didn't always be the case. I know that you've been farming as a family for about over 40 years in this area, and maybe just want to walk through some of that evolution of your farm over that 40-year period, and maybe what you see happening over the next handful of years.
Sure. So yeah, I farm in the province of Saskatchewan, which is in Western Canada. So I farm with my parents, my wife, 2 young sons, sister, some other family members. We are a family farm. And what I mean when I say a family farm is that we're family owned and operated. There's no, outside people involved aside from various banks, of course, because if we're going to run equipment like that, it does take a little bit of help. So that's what a family farm looks like. We manage it and we do everything together. So we grow canola, durum, as you saw in the video, hard red spring wheat, lentils, peas, flax, various other crops depending on the year and the market conditions that we're dealing with. So one of the cool things about being in a family operation is the multi-generational legacy that comes with that. So my grandparents settled on the farm that we're still living on back in 1956. So we're 3rd generation here. So I get to farm land that my grandfather farmed, which is pretty amazing. And it does also kind of help reinforce the idea that we really, in a sense, don't own the land, we're borrowing it. We're borrowing it from our kids, because the strategy that we have, and that most operations are family operated too, in North America and a lot of other places in the world, is that we want to have another generation here. So that influences how we think about everything that we do. And that's why soil health is such an important part of everything that we're doing. That's why we need access to, fertilizers and good genetics crop protection products, and technology. All of these things together help us be better at what we do and help us be more sustainable. You know, this year was really dry. We typically get about 325 to 350 millimeters of rain in a year in this part of the world. So we're pretty dry compared to a lot of other places in the world. This year was exceptionally dry, less than 100 millimeters of rainfall this year. And, you know, my dad and my grandparents have experienced this in the 80s and the 30s and other years. But what we can do with that amount of rain today is absolutely remarkable. We can grow a good average crop in a year like this where they might not have had a crop at all. You know, in a year like this in the 30s, grandpa's parents might have had a hard time putting food on the table. And that's because of the technology that we have access to, good genetics and good farming practices.
Well, one of those practices, Jake, was, you know, the introduction of zero tillage. And maybe you just want to walk our audience through that, because it's such an important intervention that seems so simple on the surface, and yet it is actually quite complicated. But it speaks to your point about being good stewards of the land while still being able to operate under very dry conditions like you experienced this year.
Yeah, so I'll try and simplify it as much as I can. Maybe a good example is for any of you that have had a garden or remember a garden at your parents' place when you were little or anything like that. You always work it up till the ground is black, and then you go and put your crop in, right? We don't do that anymore. So we leave the stubble out from last year's crop, stubble being what's left of the plant after we harvest it, and we directly seed into that. So that allows us to capture snow during the winter. It prevents erosion, and it just keeps the ground insulated. That's what no-till means, is that we're not going and flipping that soil over to try and create a proper seed bed, because we have the tools, good seeding equipment to be able to seed directly into that. It's been a huge benefit to the environment, and it's completely changed Western Canadian agriculture. There's no more dirt blowing in the air as a result of that.
Yeah, there's a very interesting movie out called Kissing the Soil, and it shows MODIS satellite imagery of clouds of soil going through the atmosphere during April, and how that changes as the crop gets established and grows, and it reverses that trend of capturing the carbon. And so your zero-till management of the soil is actually a very important intervention around climate change, because you're actually capturing a lot of carbon that's in the atmosphere and keeping it in the soil. And then the benefits you've already highlighted of increased soil moisture, increased soil health through microorganisms. So really, on the surface, a very simple intervention, but extremely complex, like you say, and important for modern agriculture. I'm very keen, you know, you say it's a family farm, but it's a huge farm. I mean, 14,500 acres. Maybe you know, it would be good for you to just explain how you manage that complexity, maintain diversity on the farm, so that it remains a very healthy farm.
Yeah, I mean, in Western Canada, you know, there's a lot of farms this size or bigger. We're I would say maybe a moderate sized farm out here. In drier climates, it's easier to do broad acre farming because you can go bigger with the equipment, wider. And we don't have as much staff as a lot of people might think. There's 6 of us full-time on the farm, including my dad, myself, my sister, my brother-in-law, and a couple of full-time non-family employees. And then we bring in some extra help during harvest. So it's really just, it's all about efficiencies and organizing everybody, you know, to run all the various things and just trying to keep everything moving as much as we can. I won't say it's easy. It's not easy. I mean, it's awesome farming with family, but I mean, as you can imagine, it comes with challenges too. You know, farming with family means that there's a whole different culture around, you know, hierarchy and how we kind of pick our roles and everything else. It's really, really interesting, and it's a pretty amazing thing to be able to do.
So, you know, maybe what's been the biggest change in farming, let's say in the last 5 years from your perspective, that you want our audience to know about producing food? Because we often take food for granted. We assume it just shows up in the grocery store, which you know that's not the case.
Yeah, I mean, it's changing incredibly quickly. I mean, we have to be willing to learn and try new things on an annual basis and test and see what works and what doesn't. I guess we try again or we throw it out. In the last 5 years, just increasing precision. We're just learning more and more about each acre of land and breaking it down to smaller and smaller parts of the field. We don't manage these, 14,500 acres all as one field. I mean, we break it out into small, several acre size zones. And that's how we manage it. And it's because of technology that we can do that. That was not possible even 20 years ago. It's been an amazing change. And my grandma's still alive, and we see her on a regular basis, and we're telling her about the crops that we're getting and the things that we're doing, and she's blown away by it. It's something that she wishes she had access to when she was young. It would have been an absolute game changer for them, all of the things that we can do.
Well, you're a young farmer, and when we look at the age demographics of farming, that's not the norm, right? The average age of a farmer around the world is above, it's around 60, and so. What would you say to the youth that are watching this, that are thinking about farming? What would be sort of the inspiration that you would give them to be thinking about how they can contribute to farming or being a farmer themselves?
The thing about farming that if you want to do it, you have to be willing to do is to have an open mind and never stop learning. You have to be able to be fascinated by learning everything that you can. That's what is awesome about agriculture. We're never done. We're never done learning. So if you want to be involved in a farm, ask questions, try new things, see what works, see what doesn't work. Because I can tell you one thing, you go 30 miles west of here and farm in totally different soil and a different climate. That's how quickly it changes. So you have to just be willing to try and find people who have tried things and kind of stand on their shoulders. That's what farming's all about. We're doing that here, being a third generation farm. I know that I'm standing on my grandparents' shoulders, and the more you can do that, the more time you'll save yourself. But give it a try, go for it. It's an amazing thing to be able to grow something and see the finished product.
So one last question then. One area of interest for me, given the organization I work with, is on analyzing weather and looking at ways we can adapt to climate change. How are you adapting to climate change, and how is it impacting your farm? I mean, you already mentioned this year was a very dry year. Is that an issue for your farm, and how are you managing that?
One thing about farming is the weather is always one of either your biggest opportunity or biggest challenge. So we've always had to learn how to deal with extremes in climate. And, today, we just have to keep adapting. And it comes back to trying new things, having technology. We need access to all the tools that are out there, from fertilizer to crop protection products to plant genetics to equipment technology. We need access to all of those things to be able to deal with challenging weather. The thing with challenging weather is you don't know when it's going to happen. You don't know when that storm is going to show up and dump 6 inches of rain on a crop that's already ready to go to market. And it's devastating when that happens. We had that happen last harvest. It just wouldn't stop raining and snowing, and we couldn't get the crop off. And in fact, some of it overwintered, which we've never had happen before. But we just have to find ways to adapt. And that's something that I think farmers are maybe in some sense uniquely suited for, because it's what we do.
Yeah, no, that's well stated, including adapting to COVID-19, which in our conversation prior to this, you mentioned an unusual thing happening as far as your access to transportation services to get your durum wheat and other products to market through the rail line. Any other observations around COVID and its impact on farm operations such as yours?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned, getting the product to market. I mean, we're 2,000 kilometers from the coast. So everything that we grow here has to be transported to the west coast or the east coast of Canada. So when you have anything that interrupts that logistics, system, including COVID, it can be a real challenge. One thing that COVID has done, though, is I think it's reminded people of the importance of food, the importance of good, nutritious food, and how vital it is to have access to it. So I think it's maybe put a little bit more emphasis on making sure that everybody has access to food, and making sure that there's less roadblocks in the way of getting that food to market. So if there's a silver lining to the COVID situation, maybe it's that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Great. Any sort of closing thoughts, Jake, you'd like to share with people that we haven't covered in our questions?
Well, I mean, I guess, one thing that I do want to mention is, Norman Borlaug put it well when he said, take it to the farmer. If you give farmers the ability to adapt to the situation that they find themselves in, they'll do it. So, give us the opportunity to grow good crops in a sustainable and efficient way, to grow good, nutritious food. We'll find a way to do it.
Excellent. Well stated. Actually, I had the privilege of having breakfast with Norman Borlaug when I worked at the International Center for Maize and Wheat Improvement in Mexico. And you're exactly right. He's very passionate about demand-driven innovation that focuses science on the needs of farmers and making sure that we're very intentional about making it that it reaches farmers. Science, sitting on the benches isn't going to help farmers. We really got to get out there and communicate with farmers. And so this forum has been a great one. Thanks to Farming First for bringing this group together, because it allows scientists like me to communicate with farmers like you and seeing opportunities to collaborate. And Jake and I have already found one of them to follow up on after this venue. Jake, thanks so much for sharing your insights and passion of farming. And now we're going to jump all the way to the other side of the world, over to Madhya Pradesh, India, where we're going to learn about farming in that part of the world.